friends, this is Marie with Living Felt, and today we have a fun project for you for wet felting cute little pumpkins. Ours has a bit of shine to it, and you can even change the shape or the colors that you make. It's a very beginner-friendly project. It's so great for your fall decor and your festivities. You can even go big, and you can even get wild if you want. We have some purple pumpkins in here, and you can make a white little boo pumpkin. You could even make a black pumpkin if you're going goth. This is super fun, it's easy to do, and we're going to jump into it right now. So before that, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ding the bell so you get notified every time we upload a new video, and let's jump into our project. We're going to look a little bit at these pumpkins and the resist that we use to make them, and then we're going to just jump right in and actually speed you through the process today of felting the pumpkins. Because it's a very, I just say, like regular process for wet felting. It just takes a little time, and we made ours shiny. So these, let me turn down the camera here so you can get a look at these. These are two really simple pumpkins. This one is a little bit like a gourd shape, and it has a needle felted stem. And this one is kind of a funny shaped pumpkin, which I kind of like. And it also has a needle felted stem, and this one just has a little bit of dimension to it. So these are both really fun. And the difference is, here's one, and it has a wet felted stem. So today we're going to be wet felting the body and needle felting the stem, and then I'll point you to directions you can watch a video for wet felting the stem, because we did that together. I think it's been a couple years now since we came out with our fancy schmancy pumpkins. And in case I forget to mention it later, if you're already kind of past this point, or you make a few of these and you're ready for a big challenge, we have our fairy tale pumpkin. This is a more advanced, intermediate to advanced project for wet felting, and we have a whole video on this, but we found that it's pretty long. We did it in a live felt along, took about 2 hours. So if you would be interested in us taking you through that more rapidly during a Woolly Wednesday, give us a hashtag fairy tale pumpkin in today's broadcast so we can look for that, and we'll see whether we can speed you through that process. Okay, but today we're just wet felting simple pumpkins, and that calls for a very simple resist. So a resist is the barrier that we use to felt over. These little gorditas were felted on what looks like a little flower shape. My funny pumpkin of a, see how it's kind of got an apple shape to it? That was felted on this shape, looks kind of like an apple. And the day's pumpkin, though, let me get where's my resist? Floating around here somewhere. Oh, it's just an oval shape. The pumpkin that we're doing today is just here it is. It's just kind of like a round shape, but a little bit bigger than this, the one that we're doing today. So you can keep it as simple as you want, and let's jump into what you need to make these pumpkins. I used merino top in pumpkin, I used viscose in marigold, and I used bamboo in pumpkin. That's going to give us the shiny surface. My resist is just oval, olive oil soap, a sponge. You need mesh. I like to work in a top and bottom layer. I use a rolling cloth and a little rolling bar. Hot water, of course. You're going to need to get your hot water together. And I'm working today on my super bubble, a towel, and a little grippy mat underneath. So that's all you need to get set up. It's a pretty basic setup, and you'll see me work like this a lot of the time. The first thing I want to do is divide my fiber. So I always divide my fiber while my hands are dry and my workstation is clean. This is a 2-ounce roll of fiber, and if you divide it, you know how much you're working with and how much you're using. That way you can be even on both sides of the project. Even going to use all of it, but if you just divide your fibers evenly in the beginning, you'll know how much you have for each side. Okay, I like to set down my mesh as my base layer, And if you're new to working with me, this is so that I have this nice little sandwich and I can just flip-flop it around without ever disturbing the fibers. So we're going to lay out 3 layers of fiber, and each one will be nice and thin. So you want to pull your wool off. Make sure it's flat when you pull it off, and only pull off as much as you can control that fiber so that it doesn't have gaps in it and it doesn't have folds in it. And that's the reason for dividing that piece into 3, so that I have a nice little thin layer. And I'm going over the edge just about an inch. Just about an inch. And you want to slightly overlap each little tuft of fiber that you're working with. Somebody else said, great orange. I agree. I really love this orange for this pumpkin. Okay, so once you have this whole layer laid out, remember to pause and feel your project. So here I'm turning it back how I want it, and press all the air out and just feel and make sure that it's all level. You want to fill in any gaps while you're in the layout process. Now I'm going to go ahead and add my bling right on top right now, and this is the viscose, and I just decided to make it stripy so that it alternates a little bit. You know, you could just tuft it out, cloud it on, and cover the whole thing with little clouds of viscose, but I wanted to make it kind of stripy. And hey, I'm being a little heavy-handed here, and people often ask us about the thickness, or does it felt, or how does one compare to the other? And 2 things. 1, the fiber underneath is fine enough to migrate up through this luster fiber that I'm putting on top, and we file all these things under luster fibers on our website. And this viscose just makes a really nice sheen, and in general it's a pretty inexpensive product to give you that bling on top. And then the bamboo is really its close cousin. Neither of these are protein fibers. And the bamboo is also going to give some nice sheen and squiggle to it. And I'm going to alternate with the bamboo stripes. You know, you can decorate your pumpkin just any way you want. And our fairy tale pumpkins get kind of wild with all the different lobes. They're not like this orderly. But just have fun with this process, even if you decide to have no bling, or maybe decide to, you know, put a hanky on instead.
And what embellishment fibers are you using here?
Viscose in marigold and bamboo in pumpkin. And that's the only ones I used. Yep.
Does the bamboo and the viscose felt like silk?
Yes, the bamboo and the viscose are pretty much going to behave like silk. You might decide that you like the sheen of one over the other. You might decide that you think one squiggles more or differently than the other. So we package these things in little amounts so you can, you know, stock up your studio with some variety, and just play with them and see how you like them. But I really like the sheen that they bring to the project. So once your project is all laid out, now it's time to felt. Okay. So here we are. We're going to wet out side 1, and the first thing I want to do is cover the project with mesh, so that I don't disturb any of my fibers. And I like mesh because I can wet through it and I can do my initial felting through it, and it helps just kind of keep the fibers in place. Again, I'm working with our olive oil soap, and I generally put the soap in the bucket and run the super, super hot water at the same time so that I can get a little bit of soap into that water. I also like to use a sponge to wet out. It just helps me push the water and the soap into the project. That's how I like to do it. So we're going to just wet out this entire side. And what you want is it to be flat and soapy and wet. If you're using a coarser fiber or a fiber that seems to resist water, just take the extra time it needs. You don't want dry patches. And after I wet, I just do a little bit of hand massaging only on the side of the fibers that are on the top side of the resist. Nothing going over the resist yet. And that's just a little initial pass. If you're working with mesh, if you're new to mesh, if you tend to be heavy-handed, then you're going to want to check more often, and I do it all the time anyway, and peel back your mesh at a real shallow layer and make sure that your project is not sticking to the mesh. If it's pilling, remember, if you see the fibers pilling up through the mesh, you're just using too much pressure. So make sure your hands are nice and slippy slidey. Okay, so we flipped our project over and we're going to cook a little bit through side 2 because side 2 is largely a repeat of side 1. Here's the magic of the mesh. Use it to help fold your project over the resist. You want it to hug tightly. If you're getting seams when you felt over the resist, meaning it slips off the resist, then try this for getting a nice tight hug, and also try a thin project like this at first. I mean, this is a really thin project, but we're going to felt it down enough with no bare spots that we can stuff it without any holes. So just take your time and get everything wrapping around, and then we're going to repeat our layout on side 2, and we're just going to cook through this a little bit. And again, I'm dividing it into 3 narrow strips so that I can lay it out nicely and thinly. So again, we're going to be very gentle here and wet everything out. Take your time with that, and notice that there are some fibers extending over the edge. So we are going to bring those around here in just a second. Peel back your mesh. Again, always train yourself to peel back your mesh if you use it to make sure it's not sticking. Sometimes people say that they think the mesh is too aggressive, but it's the hands on top of the mesh that need to be moderated. So just care for that, and once again, fluff all your little edges over and get them wrapped back around. And take your time with that. Just get that all the way, all the way, all the way. here we are at stage 1. We're just going back to a little bit of handwork. So start working your pumpkin. You want to gently massage all those edges and make sure that you're hugging the resist at all times. So notice my thumb is just running right along the side. Now I want to tell you, this particular project, 1, it's very thin. 2, the fibers are very fine, and 3, we have a lot of like luster design fibers on top. It's going to feel a little different than when you work with 100% wool. Those processed fibers, viscose and bamboo, quite honestly, are very highly processed fibers, and they're very slick. That's where you get that sheen from. They're going to feel slick in your hands too. So take your time in felting this and give the wool that's underneath time to migrate up. We start with very gentle handwork. It's like gliding, not rubbing, gliding across. And we're just trying to get a surface skin to form before we start rolling. And I work both sides and the edges to make that happen. So do your handwork, and we spent probably 5 to 7 minutes on each side. It doesn't take that long. Just remember to peel back your mesh and then just repeat the same thing on the second side. So once you've done your handwork on both sides, it is time to roll. And I am rolling with a bamboo mat. Do I have it here? I'm rolling with a bamboo mat covered with a grippy shelf liner. It's just one of my favorite tools for felting something that is a little more delicate and fine. Roll our pumpkin, and I put the roll right on the base of the pumpkin. I'm rolling it up in my super bubble, and now I'm going to roll it in my quilt square. Use a quilt square or a hand towel or something that's very thin. What's nice is once it gets wet, it really helps seal down your project and clamp it down. So we're going to jump through the rolling because it's very boring and repetitive, and I'm just going to explain what it is. I do a rock and roll count of 25, just like this, and then once I get to 25, I'm going to give it a quarter turn on its axis, just like you saw me do there. So rock and roll 25, give it a quarter turn on its axis, and then rock and roll it another 25. Unroll the project, and notice as I'm going to give it a quarter turn. That means I'm going to take that whole little pumpkin and turn the 12 o'clock to 3 o'clock. I check my mesh, make sure it's not sticking, and turn it. 12 o'clock will now become 3 o'clock. And you can just turn the whole mesh. So I want you to do these rock and roll counts of, it's 50 actually, because you're going to do 25 quarter turn on its axis, 25. So that's 50 rolls from each edge, and do that on both sides of your pumpkin. Both sides of your pumpkin. So that's 50 times from each edge on each side is 100 times from each edge, right, Anne? Okay, so y'all don't have to watch me roll this whole pumpkin so we can get to the really fun part. Here's my bionic rolling so you can see that I really did it and nobody else did it. You can see that it actually happens. And I think this whole thing, I don't know, each side probably took about 6 or 7 minutes to do the rock and rolls. It doesn't take that long, but you got to do it. And I just offer the reminder, y'all, that you're making handmade fabric. Just remember, you're making handmade fabric. There's no way to make it go fast. It's going to take a little bit of time, and you're going to have this thing, you know, forever and ever. And I felted my pumpkin on both sides. It's starting to shrink up. I like to check it with my hands a little bit, rub that fiber, make sure that it really is felting, blot some water out, and you can do that anytime it feels too sloppy. I used to felt a lot more sloppy than I do now. But what I'm checking here is to make sure it's buckling up on the resist. You want to see a little buckle, and that means that the fiber is shrinking down smaller than the resist you have underneath, and then I'm pinching it to make sure that I have a good fabric. If you don't, then felt it some more. I really like these circles. See how I'm doing circles? When you're at this stage, you can use more pressure and more strength, and the circles really help speed up the felting, like in a particular direction. You've been going upsy, downsy, leftsy, rightsy, so to speak, and circles add another element to that shrinkage. So don't be shy to do that. So if you need to keep working your piece, work it as much as you need to until it's done. And I like doing handwork myself. I did spend a few more minutes doing this, and you can also roll it all by itself, and then you start to really see the buckling as you roll it. So what we're gonna do is take our resist out here, and now comes the answer to that question, right? Where am I gonna cut? Where's it gonna be? We're gonna cut right on the end because I wanted an oblong pumpkin. I wanted it to be a little bit taller so that I could squish it down when I stuff it and get the edges out. Get your super Sharpie scissors and try not to cut your resist. You only want to cut a hole as big as you need to get your resist out. So start in the middle and cut a little to the left and a little to the right. And I think my hole was not more than an inch big. Someone says, can you wear latex gloves to keep your hands from drying out? Sure, if you like. Some people do. I like to feel the fiber. Someone says, what type of mesh? And this mesh is available in our store. We sell it. We've been using this for, I guess, 15 years or so. And someone says, Anne says, can't wait to have a place set up for wet felting. Hey, on this project, you could do this on your kitchen island or cutting board, or shoot, you could felt it in your bathroom if you had to. You could felt this in your hotel room. It's small enough. Okay, so look, my resist is out, and what we want to do now is full it. We spent the first 20 minutes or so wet felting our piece. We've created a nice soft felt, and now it's time to full it, and that means we're going to shrink it down. So now it's time to get our hands busy, and we're going to repeat actually the same things we did before, and that is we're going to felt by hand and we're going to roll. Okay, I've got fresh hot water right here. I'm swishing up my soap. I'm gonna heat it up a little bit. And if you don't feel like you need to wet it, great. But really what I'm trying to do is heat it up. And that's why I'm adding more water. If you're concerned about your project at this point, take your time. If you're feeling like the insides will felt together, we'll felt it a little bit and then change up the shape so that you can keep the two sides from sticking together. It's absolutely preventable at this place. And we don't have to even worry about covering up our finishing our little hole that we made, because we're just going to cover that up with our stem. Now our stem is going to go right where we cut the resist out. So this is a lot of repeat of what you've already done. Handwork, massaging in the direction that you want shrinkage. So I want you to think about that. If I were to spend all my time felting this pumpkin, say from top to bottom, from the bottom to where I cut the hole, it's going to get shorter in that direction and become a squattier pumpkin. But I want my pumpkin to become oblong, so I'm going to felt it a little more from side to side. The first thing I do is take out that sort of trained edge, not a crease, but that trained shape that we gave it from it being flat. And I'm rubbing what were the sides of the resist to make them a little flat. So spend a little time and do a little bit of handwork across your pumpkin, and that's all I'm doing is just working out those little trained edges of what had been the resist and rubbing those out. Remember, it feels a little slimy with all this bling fiber on top. It's just going to feel a little different, but take your time. And I'm felting mine the long way so that it becomes a little more narrow. Now I'm gonna have to jump us ahead so that we can get to the stuffing point, but this part is called fulling, and I'm just rolling the pumpkin right on my super bubble. I do like the super bubble for that. Some people feel that the super bubble is too aggressive. I like using it as a work surface. If you're of that mindset, you might like to work on bubble wrap, just the small bubble wrap. So do what works for you. And just real quickly here, I like to do this wadding. You might, if you throw it, it's gonna get a little, sometimes it gets fuzzy if you throw it too soon. But I like to do what I call wadding in my hand here. And if you feel like thwapping it to give your fibers to, they kind of tend to squiggle a little better when you throw it, or when you do this kind of disorganized approach to fulling. That's what happens, you know, when you don't just roll or you don't just rub. And we've gotten just a little bit of shrinkage here, but you can continue fulling it to get it as far as you want. So all I really want is a good quality felt with integrity that I can stuff, and I have it already. So what you want to do, friends, is get your pumpkin to where you want, and then go ahead and rinse out all the soap. Rinse out all the soap. You can do a little felting in the hot and cold water rinses. Rinse out all the soap, and you can soak it in vinegar if you want. I think the bling fibers don't, since they're not protein fibers, they don't really behave the same way. The most important thing would just be to get all of the soap out. And you can let it dry, but it doesn't have to be bone dry. You don't want it to be bone dry because we are going to stuff this thing while it's still moist. And I'm going to show you how I tied up this one, and then I'm going to show you how I tied up another one. Twine, and my polyfill is called Silky Soft. The Ultra Plush Fiber. I either got it off Amazon or at the sewing store. And I used to make sock dolls, so I have a lot of that for my sock doll stuff. So stuff your pumpkin, but you don't want to overstuff it because we're going to tie it and cinch it all down. So let's do a little speed stuffing because we're going to have to get to our stem here in a minute. And we're going to stuff our pumpkin as far as you want, and then we're going to tie it so that we can block it, if you will, and train in some of those grooves. Do this while it's still damp. Tie it really, really tight, because as your pumpkin shrinks, then that's also going to loosen up, even though it feels really tight in the beginning. And I'm going to show you an alternate tie that I think I like a little bit better. You can sit this outside in the sun to dry, but you know what? You could even toss it in the dryer. You could toss it in the dryer. Don't toss it in with your towels because it's going to get really, really roughed up. But you can toss it in the dryer, set it outside, let it dry overnight, but we're blocking it, so we want all of those little grooves that we just put in it to kind of be trained into the shape. So here's my next favorite tie. These are cut t-shirt strips, and if you wet felt at all, you probably have something like this laying around. I like them because they seem to make a little better of a groove in the pumpkin. So they're also pretty easy to untie if you don't overly knot them. But they kind of train the shape in the pumpkin a little bit better. Just because it's not so thin. It's not as thin as the string. So let me get my hands out of the way and you'll see what I mean. And it just trains them in a little bit better. Now what we're gonna do is you can kind of, if you squish this down, you have some really fun shapes, and you can even see the stripes from our bling fiber. But let me show you, let me see. This, if you're not loving your grooves, this big pumpkin, I also ran stitches down him, so you can run stitches from top to bottom. Hit the heart. You can run stitches from top to bottom and pull those taut to help kind of latch it down. So just consider playing with that. You could also do like a button from top to bottom if you want your pumpkin a little more squashed. Okay, I have here MC1 in Shire, and I also have just a simple chenille stem. You can make your stem or as long as you want. As I mentioned, we have a little place where you can see how to needle felt this, how to wet felt the stem. This is for needle felting the stem. The first thing I like to do is make a little hook in my chenille, and I'm going to give it a little twist. You just need it, you need your stem longer than you want it, so you have room to anchor it down here inside your pumpkin. I'm going to push this up through the loop, and then we're going to twist. I like it to stick off because I like to make my stems square when I needle felt them. It's just kind of a preference. And just glop all this on there, but keep it as tight as you can and with minimal lumps and bumps. Better to build up the bulk by doing multiple layers, but we're gonna have to move kind of fast through ours. So I'm just using my little stack of 42 needles here. Use whatever you like. 38 triangle, 38 star would work good here. That's all you have to do to kind of form your stem. The chenille stem is mellow enough that you're not going to break your needles on it, even if you use fine needles. And I'm just poking really to the middle of the stack. You don't need to go all the way through to the foam. That's what gives you a fuzzy product on the end. Now, I'm sure there are a number of ways you could do this. This is just my way, meaning this, whether it's wet felting the pumpkin or needle felting the stem or heck, wet felting the stem, there's always a number of ways you can do this, and this is just kind of one way. So work on your stem and get it all how you want it. Mine definitely needs work. Let me see if I show you. This is one I made for this project, and he's a little stripy, and I like to make him square, and I like to make him dense. So notice that I'm really pinching on this guy. Notice the whites of my nail beds. It's really firm. The reason I like the chenille stem inside is because you can give it a twist and a crook, and it'll keep the shape that you give it. That makes it, to me, feel a little more fun, and I can also then blunt that edge when you needle felt it. So here's the green one that I made, dark green one that I made from Bonsai is the color in our MC1 bat, and then I added these little things on top. So all you got to do, I like to hook this up so that it doesn't poke through the bottom, and if you decide you wanted to sew it down, you could like sew up from under the bottom. You'd have something you could grab onto. So hook this up so that it doesn't poke to the bottom, and then dig yourself a hole in there and put your stem just right down in it. Now, that's all you got to start with, is your stem just stuck into that little hole, and then you can go around and needle felt wool on the top, and you're going to anchor the wool to there. So start by wrapping around your stem just like this, and you're going to needle felt both to the stem and to the pumpkin. So just start there and work your way around. Use whatever needles work for you, more aggressive or more fine, whatever feels good. And hey, no rush. I saw someone comment earlier that what helped with the rolling was no sound and having Netflix on or something like that. This should be fun. You know, these pumpkins, you're going to have a lifetime, or whoever you give them to is going to have a lifetime. There's nothing like them. This is not like what you buy at the big department store. This is not like what you buy on Amazon, and it sure as heck isn't like the felted stuff that comes from China and God bless Nepal. Honestly, it isn't. This is something that you spent hours on and time on. Whoever you give it to, even if it's yourself or your family, is going to cherish it. So take your time with it and enjoy the process. And now, once you kind of get this all tacked down and take your time to get it felted, well then you can add your little spirals down, or even locks. You can even add some locks in there. So let me show you this one. On this guy, we have some really fun and crazy locks in there. And you can go brown and get kind of fun with those colors. This is some stuff from our wild vine, which is just usually a mix of fleece, different types of wool, and also variegated colors. Let me see. On our fancy pumpkins, I like to add like an extra curly Q, and this is wet felted, but it's another wire that's been felted over. So, you know, you could add a leaf, go viney if you want, and spend all your time that you want on this, and then just add your locks however you want them right on there. If you don't know how to work with locks, some people just call and ask for curls. You want to find what's the natural tapered pointy tip versus the cut tip, like this is the natural end of the fleece, and then pull from there. And this is kind of a wild bunch that I have, but just fold them in half and needle felt them in, and don't get too fussy about it. I would spend a lot more time on my stem than this, but I just want to give you the basic idea for finishing off your pumpkins. Needle felt these all around, go down as far as you want. You might sign the bottom, you might put your little signature, you could put a little felt thing on the bottom, or I like to put a little heart on mine often. But I want you to see how shiny those look when they're dry. If it's the first time working with the bling fibers, don't worry about it. When you're done, when it's dry, that's when you're going to see the sheen. And when you store them away for the year, store them away in like a little airtight container so that they are safe all year. But that's our pumpkin tutorial for this year. Guys, thank you so much for joining us today. We hope you've had fun felting along. We hope that you'll finish your pumpkins and share them in our group, Living Felt Friends. That's on Facebook, or just Google our name and you will find us. So this is our little wet felt pumpkin project. We even have a more complex one. So you can go to our website and click under the Learn tab. We have a free tutorial and also a full-length video on doing the really complex pumpkins. And maybe we'll bring that into a Woolly Wednesday also. But we hope you've had fun today. We can't wait to see your pumpkins. Thank you for joining us. And remember to subscribe and hit the bell, get notified every time we upload a new video. We'll see you in our group. Bye, guys.